for some history. Nobody yet. Oh well. We'll get going. Whether there's anybody here or not. Dearman's in the house. How you doing there, buddy? Nice to have you being the first one in the chat. Appreciate you being faithful to me there, Dearman. We're going to do another history lesson today. Today's going to be the Babe Ruth story. Hopefully you're excited today to learn a little bit about Babe Ruth. One of the most awesome players in baseball history. Good StreamYard today. This Streamlabs, not StreamYard today. I don't think I'll be doing that. Mike Olson's in the house. All right, thanks for joining us this morning, Mike. Thanks for hopping on board. If you are new on the channel, I'm trying to remember. I'll have to double check after the stream and stuff, but if you do get a chance, just go and like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell when I see your comment in my comments. When I do my replies and stuff, I'll double check and make sure that I have you as a subscriber on my channel. Can you do some StreamYard today, later, maybe, please? I don't know, Dearman. I might. I have to do this stream this morning. I have to run some errands, and then I might try and do a StreamYard later this afternoon. We'll see what happens. I might try and do that. Do another live today to get some more watch hour times. I'm trying to get my watch hours. I need about 1,100 hours to go to get my watch hours up to my 4K. So that's what I'm working on. But no family mail call, but the mail could be here before I do my afternoon stream, and if so, I would open up a package this afternoon if I do get one. That's part of my errands, is to go out to my business address, then check my personal mailbox, and I got to go to the bank for my church to get our church deposit put in the bank. So I do have a bunch of errands to do today. But I most likely, since my wife is kind of visiting with my niece and her sister and brother-in-law, she spent the night there last night. I may do an afternoon stream until she gets home later today. So we will see what happens there. I'm going to let this cycle through one last time here and then go ahead and turn off my little intro video and get things ready to go here now. So I'm going to move my camera down a little bit. Get it on my table here and get things ready for today. Here, let me try and put this maybe over here for now. Trying to figure out how to line everything up. I will be going over Babe Ruth's biography for our history lesson today, and I will be highlighting this set of cards that I do have here. It's 160. Let me double check to make sure. 162 card mini set for Babe Ruth. Kind of goes through his career for the most part. And I'll be highlighting this old book that I have on the Babe Ruth story. I'll put that up here so you can kind of, let's see. I have to put it sideways because it's so tall. But I'm going to highlight and go through this little old book from way back in the day. Trying to remember what the copyright is on this old booklet I have. I don't know for sure if I can see a copyright. I know it's a little bit older. Had it for quite some time. But this is from a movie they made on the Babe Ruth, called The Babe Ruth Story. So I'll be going over that when we get to that part. So I will start right at 10:30 promptly with our history lesson. So this is a time that I can chat in the chat room. I do want to welcome everybody in the chat here today. Let me just typing something in on the chat here. Oops. So far, it looks like it's just Dearman and Mike Olson in the house. So, let me get this. Trying to get some other things set up just before 10:30. We got about 3 minutes left. All right. So there we go. Got that in the chat. So it looks like so far just 2 people, Mike Olson and Dearman 2019. So yes. Got about 2 more minutes and then we'll get started here. Give some people a chance to come in. I know some said they would be here today for my live stream. But sometimes everybody knows that everybody keeps busy in their day, in their lives. So we'll just see. Oh, come on, get out of there. Trying to get something. What the heck is this thing doing? My phone's getting. Now my phone is being really picky. Get something else set up real quick here. Come on. Okay, that's good. That's good. All right, we got about 1 more minute and I will get into my history lesson, even though my phone is not cooperating with me. Oh my word, get out of there. Oh, there we go. Now I got it. Okay, we have 10:30. So without further ado, I am going to get into our history lesson here for Babe Ruth. Hopefully everybody's excited about this one. Looks like we do have 5 people in the stream. Only 2 people chatting, but that is fine. Some people are lurking and hiding in the background. That's perfectly fine. So without further ado, yes, I'm going to get into our history lesson for Babe Ruth. So George Herman Babe Ruth Jr., born February 6th, 1895, and died August 16th, 1948, was an American professional baseball player whose career in Major League Baseball spanned 22 seasons from 1914 through 1935. Nicknamed the Bambino, the Sultan of SWAT, he began his Major League career as a star left-handed pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, but achieved his greatest fame as a slugging outfielder for the New York Yankees. Ruth established many Major League batting and some pitching records, including career home runs 714. Kevin's card collecting, he made it. Sunshine Cooper, hello. The Queen Sunshine is here. Thanks for jumping in with us, Sunshine Cooper. Again, if you see somebody new in the chat, go ahead and jump on board their bus. For those that are new to the channel, make sure you do, just when you get a chance, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that bell for notifications. Make sure you do give me that thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up in the live here if you can. I really do appreciate that. And then make sure you leave a heartfelt comment when you do comment to a video. And when I see that in my comment sections, if I don't have you already on board my bus and on my subscribership, I will make sure that I do join and visit your channel and make you part of the family. All right, so make sure if any of the moderators can help me out in that area as I'm reading through our history lesson, I really would appreciate that. Let me tip this down just a little bit more. For those that just did hop on, I will be highlighting this booklet on the Babe Ruth story. Okay, try and hold this at an angle so you can kind of see it, because it's pretty big to fit on the camera here. So I will be highlighting this booklet here, and then at the end, after the biography lesson, I will go over this 162 card baseball card set. It's similar to the Conlon collection type layout, and I will be going over this also at the end of the stream. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to continue where I just left off here. All right, Ruth established many major league batting and some pitching records, including career home runs 714, runs batted in at 2,213, and bases on balls of 2,062, a slugging percentage of 690, and on base OPS of 1.164. The last two still stand as of 2019. Ruth is regarded as one of the greatest sports heroes in American culture and is considered by many to be the greatest baseball player of all time. In 1936, Ruth was elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame as one of its first 5 inaugural members. At age 7, Ruth was sent to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys, a reformatory where he was mentored by Brother Matthias Boultier of the Xaverian Brothers, the school's disciplinarian and a capable baseball player. In 1914, Ruth was signed to play minor league baseball for the Baltimore Orioles, but was soon sold to the Red Sox. By 1916, he had built a reputation as an outstanding pitcher who sometimes hit long home runs, a feat unusual for any player in the pre-1920 dead ball era. Although Ruth twice won 23 games in a season as a pitcher and was a member of 3 World Series championship teams with the Red Sox, he wanted to play every day and was allowed to convert to an outfielder. With regular playing time, he broke the MLB single-season home run record in 1919. After that season, Red Sox owner Harry Fraze sold Ruth to the Yankees amid controversy. Trade fueled Boston's subsequent 86-year championship drought and popularized the curse of the Bambino superstition. In his 15 years with the Yankees, Ruth helped the team win 7 American League pennants and 4 World Series championships. His big swing led to escalating home run totals that not only drew fans to the ballpark and boosted the sport's popularity, but also helped usher in baseball's live ball era, which evolved from a low-scoring game of strategy to a sport where the home run was a major factor. As part of the Yankees' vaunted Murderers Row lineup of 1927, Ruth hit 60 home runs, which extended his MLB single season record by a single home run. Ruth's last season with the Yankees was 1934. He retired from the game the following year after a short stint with the Boston Braves. During his career, Ruth led the American League in home runs during a season 12 times. During Ruth's career, he was the target of intense press and public attention for his baseball exploits and off-field penchants for drinking and womanizing. After his retirement as a player, he was denied the opportunity to manage a major league club, most likely due to poor behavior during parts of his playing career. In his final years, Ruth made many public appearances, especially in support of American efforts in World War II. In 1946, he became ill with nasopharyngeal cancer and died from the disease 2 years later. Ruth remains a part of American culture, and in 2018, President Donald Trump posthumously awarded him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The early years for Babe Ruth. George Herman Ruth was born in 1895 at 216 Emory Street in the Pigtown section of Baltimore, Maryland. Ruth's parents, Catherine Nee Schamberger and George Herman Ruth Sr., were both of German ancestry. According to the 1880 census, his parents were born in Maryland. His paternal grandparents were from Prussia and Hanover. Ruth Sr. worked a series of jobs that included lightning rod salesman and streetcar operator. The elder Ruth became a counterman in a family-owned combination grocery and saloon business on Frederick Street. George Ruth Jr. was born in the house of his maternal grandfather, plus Schamberger, a German immigrant and trade unionist. Only one of Ruth's 7 siblings, his younger sister Mamie, survived in infancy. Many details of Ruth's childhood are unknown, including the date of his parents' marriage. As a child, Ruth spoke German. When Ruth was a toddler, the family moved to 339 South Woodyear Street, not far from the rail yards. By the time he was 6 years old, his father had a saloon with an upstairs apartment at 426 West Camden Street. Details are equally scanty about why Ruth was sent at the age of 7 to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys, a reformatory and orphanage. However, according to Julia Ruth Stevens' recount in 1999, because George Sr. was a saloon owner in Baltimore and had given Ruth little supervision growing up, he became a delinquent. Ruth was sent to St. Mary's because George Sr. ran out of ideals to discipline and mentor his son. As an adult, Ruth admitted that as a youth, he had been running the steels and rarely attending school, as well was drinking beer when his father was not looking. Some accounts say that following a violent incident at his father's saloon, the city authorities decided that this environment was unsuitable for a small child. Ruth entered St. Mary's on June 13, 1902. He was recorded as incorrigible and spent much of the next 3 years there. Although St. Mary's boys received an education, students were also expected to learn work skills and help operate the school. Particularly once the boys turned 12, Ruth became a shirt maker and was also a proficient as a carpenter. He would adjust his own shirt collars rather than having a tailor do it. So, Even during his well-paid baseball career, the boys aged 5 to 21 did most of the work around the facility, from cooking to shoemaking, and renovated St. Mary's in 1912. The food was simple, and the Xaverian brothers who ran the school insisted on strict discipline. Corporal punishment was common. Ruth's nickname there was Nigger Lips, as he had a large facial features and was darker than most boys at the all-white reformatory. Ruth was sometimes allowed to rejoin his family or was placed at St. James' Home, a supervised residence with work in the community, but he was always returned to St. Mary's. He was rarely visited by his family. His mother died when he was 12, and by some accounts he was permitted to leave St. Mary's only to attend the funeral. How Ruth came to play baseball is uncertain. According to one account, his placement at St. Mary's was due to a repeatedly breaking Baltimore's windows with long hits while playing street ball. By another, he was told to join a team on his first day at St. Mary's by the school's athletic director. Brother Herman became a catcher, even though left-handers rarely play that position. During his time there, he also played third base and shortstop, again unusual for a left-hander, and was forced to wear mitts and gloves made for right-handers. He was encouraged in his pursuits by the school's prefect of discipline, Brother Matthias Boultier, a native of Nova Scotia, a large man. Brother Matthias was greatly respected by the boys both for his strength and for his fairness. For the rest of his life, Ruth would praise Brother Matthias, and his running and hitting styles closely resembled his teacher's. Ruth stated, "I think I was born as a hitter the first day I ever saw him hit a baseball." The older man became a mentor and role model to Ruth. Biographer Robert W. Kramer commented on the closeness between the two. Ruth revered Brother Matthias, which is remarkable, considering that Matthias was in charge of making boys behave and that Ruth was one of the great natural misbehaviors of all time. Ruth caught Brother Matthias's attention early, and the calm, considerable attention the big man gave the young hellraiser from Waterfront struck a spark of response in the boy's soul. That may have blunted a few of the more savage teeth in the gross man, whom I have heard at least a half a dozen of his baseball contemporaries describe with admiring awe and wonder as an animal. The school's influence remained with Ruth in other ways. He was a lifelong Catholic who would sometimes attend Mass after carousing all night, and he became a well-known member of the Knights of Columbus. He would visit orphanages, schools, and hospitals throughout his life, often avoiding publicity. He was generous to St. Mary's as he became famous and rich, donating money and his presence at fundraisers and spending $5,000 to buy Brother Matthias a Cadillac in 1926, subsequently replacing it when it was destroyed in an accident. Nevertheless, the biographer Lee Montville suggests that many of the off-the-field excesses of Ruth's career were driven by the deprivations of his time at St. Mary's. Most of the boys at St. Mary's played baseball in organized leagues at different levels of proficiency. Ruth later estimated that he played 200 games a year as he steadily climbed the ladder of success. Although he played all positions at one time or another, including infield positions generally reserved for right-handers, he gained stardom as a pitcher. According to Brother Matthias, Ruth was standing to one side, laughing at the bumbling pitching efforts of fellow students. When Matthias told him to go in and see if he could do better, Ruth had become the best pitcher at St. Mary's, and when he was 18 in 13, he was allowed to leave the premises to play weekend games on teams that were drawn from the community. He was mentioned in several newspaper articles for both his pitching prowess and ability to hit long home runs. As far as professional baseball, he was in the minor leagues with the Baltimore Orioles. In early 1914, Ruth signed a professional baseball contract with Jack Dunn, who owned and managed the minor league Baltimore Orioles, an international league team. The circumstances of Ruth's signing are not known with certainty. Historical fact is obscured by stories that cannot all be true. By some accounts, Dunn was urged to attend a game between an all-star team from St. Mary's and one from another Xaverian facilities, Mount St. Mary's College. Some versions have Ruth running away before the eagerly awaited game to return in time to be punished and then pitching St. Mary's to victory as Dunn watched. Others have the Washington Senators pitcher Joe Engel, a Mount St. Mary's graduate, pitching in an alumni game after watching a preliminary contest between the college's freshmen and a team from St. Mary's, including Ruth Engel, watched Ruth play, then told Dunn about him at a chance meeting in Washington. Ruth, in his autobiography, stated only that he worked out for Dunn for a half hour and was signed. According to biographer Cal Wagening, there were legal difficulties to be straightened out as Ruth was supposed to remain at the school until he turned 21, though Sports Century stated in a documentary that Ruth had already been discharged from St. Mary's when he turned 19 and earned a monthly salary of $100. The train journey to spring training in Fayetteville, North Carolina in early March was likely Ruth's first outside the Baltimore area. The rookie ball player was the subject of various pranks by the veterans, who were probably also the source of his famous nickname. There are various accounts of how Ruth came to be called Babe. Most center on his being referred to as Dunny's Babe, or a variant. Sports Century reported that his nickname was gained because he was the new darling or project of Dunn, not only due to Ruth's raw talent, but also because of his lack of knowledge of the proper etiquette of eating out in a restaurant, being in a hotel, or being on a train. Babe was, at the time, a common nickname in baseball, with perhaps the most famous to that being Pittsburgh Pirates pitcher and 1909 World Series hero Babe Adams, who appeared younger than his actual age. Ruth made his first appearance as a professional ball player in an inter-squad game on March 7, 1914. He played shortstop and pitched the last 2 innings of a 15-9 victory. In his second at-bat, Ruth hit a long home run to right field. The blast was locally reported to be longer than a legendary shot by Jim Thorpe in Fayetteville. Ruth made his first appearance against a team in organized baseball in an exhibition game versus the Major League Philadelphia Phillies. Ruth pitched the middle 3 innings and gave up 2 runs in the 4th, but then settled down and pitched a scoreless 5th and 6th innings. In a game against the Phillies the following afternoon, Ruth entered during the 6th inning and did not allow a run the rest of the way. The Orioles scored 7 runs in the bottom of the 8th inning to overcome a 6-0 deficit, and Ruth was the winning pitcher. Once the regular season began, Ruth was a star pitcher who was also dangerous at the plate. The team performed well, yet received almost no attention from the Baltimore press. A third major league, the Federal League, had begun play, and the local franchise, the Baltimore Terrapins, restored that city to the major leagues for the first time since 1902. Few fans visited Oriole Park, where Ruth and his teammates labored in relatively obscurity. Ruth may have been offered a bonus and a large salary to jump to the Terrapins. When rumors to that effect swept Baltimore, giving Ruth the most publicity he had experienced to date, the Terrapins official denied it, stating it was their policy not to sign players under contract to Dunn. The competition from the Terrapins caused Dunn to sustain large losses, although by late June, the Orioles were in first place, having won over 2/3 of their games. The paid attendance dropped as low as 150. Dunn explored a possible move by the Orioles to Richmond, Virginia, as well as the sale of a majority interest in the club. These possibilities fell through, leaving Dunn with little choice other than to sell his best players to major league teams to raise money. He offered Ruth to the reigning World Series champions, Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. But Mack had his own financial problems. The Cincinnati Reds and New York Giants expressed interest in Ruth, but Dunn sold his contract, along with those of pitchers Ernie Shore and Ben Egan, to the Boston Red Sox of the American League on July 4th. The sale price was announced as $25,000, but other reports lower the amount to half that, or possibly $8,500, plus the cancellation of a $3,000 loan. Ruth remained with the Orioles for several days while the Red Sox completed a road trip and reported the team in Boston on July 11th. So the Boston Red Sox is where he played from 1914 to 1919. He was a developing star. On July 11th, 1914, Ruth arrived in Boston with Egan and Shore. Ruth later told the story of how that morning he had met Helen Woodford, the girl who would become his first wife. She was a 16-year-old waitress at Lander's coffee shop, and Ruth related that she served him when he had taken breakfast there. Other stories, though, suggested that the meeting occurred on another day, perhaps under the other circumstances. Regardless of when he began to woo his first wife, he won the first game as a pitcher for the Red Sox that afternoon 4-3 over the Cleveland Naps. His catcher, Bill Carrigan, who was also the Red Sox manager, Shore was given a start by Carrigan the next day. He won that, and his second start thereafter was pitched regularly. Ruth lost his second start and was thereafter little used. In his major league debut as a batter, Ruth went 0-2 against left-hander Willie Mitchell, striking out in his first at-bat before being removed for a pinch hitter in the 7th inning. Ruth was not much noticed by the fans as Bostonians watched the Red Sox crosstown rivals, the Braves, begin a legendary comeback that would take them from last place on the 4th of July to the 1914 World Series Championship. Hold on a second, just let me get a sip of water here. All right, we have 5 in the chat. LA Collections here. All right, about that brief intermission here. Egan was traded to Cleveland after 2 weeks on the Boston roster. During his time with the Red Sox, he kept an eye on the inexperienced Ruth, much as Dunn had in Baltimore when he was traded. No one took his place as supervisor. Ruth's new teammates considered him brash and would have preferred him as a rookie to remain quiet and inconspicuous. When Ruth insisted on taking batting practice, despite being both a rookie who did not play regularly and a pitcher, he arrived to find his bats sawn in half. His teammates nicknamed him the Big Baboon, a name the swarthy swarthy Ruth, who had disliked the nickname Nigger Lips at St. Mary's, detested. Ruth had received a raise on promotion to the major leagues and quickly acquired tastes for fine food, liquor, and women, among other temptations. Manager Kerrigan allowed Ruth to pitch 2 exhibition games in mid-August, although Ruth won both against minor league competition. He was not restored to the pitching rotation. It was uncertain why Kerrigan did not give Ruth additional opportunities to pitch. There are legends filmed for the screen, the Babe Ruth story in 1948, that the young pitcher had a habit of signaling his intent to throw a curveball by sticking out his tongue slightly, and that he was easily to hit until this changed. Creamer pointed out that it is common for inexperienced pitchers to display such habits, and the need to break Ruth of his would not constitute a reason to not use him at all. The biographer suggested that Kerrigan was unwilling to use Ruth due to poor behavior by the rookie. On July 30th, 1914, Boston owner Joseph Lannon had purchased the minor league Providence Grays, members of the International League. The Providence team had been owned by several people associated with Detroit Tigers, including the hitter Ty Cobb, and as part of the transaction, a Providence pitcher was sent to the Tigers to soothe Providence fans upset at losing a star. Lannon announced that the Red Sox would soon send a replacement to the Grays. This was intended to be Ruth, but his departure for Providence was delayed when Cincinnati Reds owner Gary Herman claimed him off waivers. After Lannon wrote to Herman explaining that the Red Sox wanted Ruth in Providence so he could develop as a player, he would not release him to a major league club. Herman allowed Ruth to be sent to the minors. Kerrigan later stated that Ruth was not sent down to Providence to make him a better player, but to help the Grays win the International League pennant, league championship. Ruth joined the Grays on August 18, 1914. After Dunn's deal, the Baltimore Orioles managed to hold on to first place until August 15th, after which they continued to fade, leaving the pennant race between Providence and Rochester. Ruth was deeply impressed by Providence manager Wild Bill Donovan, previously a star pitcher with a 25-4 win-loss record for Detroit in 1907. In later years, he credited Donovan with teaching him much about pitching. Ruth was often called upon to pitch, in one stretch starting and winning 4 games in 8 days on September 5th at Maple Leaf Park in Toronto. Ruth pitched a 1-hit 9-0 victory and his first professional home run, his only one as a minor leaguer off Ellis Johnson. Recalled Boston Providence finished the season in first place. He pitched and won a game for the Red Sox against the New York Yankees on October 2nd, getting his first major league hit, a double. Ruth finished the season with a 2-1 record as a major leaguer and a 23-8 in the international leagues for Baltimore and Providence. Once the season concluded, Ruth married Helen in Ellicott, Maryland. Creamer speculated that they did not marry in Baltimore, where the newlyweds boarded with George Ruth Sr., to avoid possible interference from those at St. Mary's. Both bride and groom were not yet of age, and Ruth remained on parole from that institution until his 21st birthday. In March 1915, Ruth reported to Hot Springs, Arkansas, for his first major league spring training. Despite a relatively successful season, he was not slated to start regularly for the Red Sox, who had already had 2 superb left-handed pitchers, according to Creamer. established the Stars' Dutch Leonard, who had broken the record for lowest earned run average in a single season, and Ray Collins, a 20-game winner in both 1913 and 1914. Ruth was ineffective in his first start, taking the loss in the third game of the season. Injuries and ineffective pitching by other Boston pitchers gave Ruth another chance, and after some good relief appearances, Kerrigan allowed Ruth another start, and he won a rain-shortened 7-inning game. 10 days later, the manager had him start against the New York Yankees at the Polo Grounds. Ruth took a 3-2 lead in the ninth, but lost the game 4-3 in 13 innings. Ruth hit ninth, as was customary for pitchers, hit a massive home run in the upper deck in the right field off of Jack Warhop. At the time, home runs were rare in baseball, and Ruth's majestic shot awed the crowd. The winning pitcher, Warhop, would, in August 1915, conclude a major league career of 8 seasons, undistinguished but for being the first major league pitcher to give up a home run to Babe Ruth. Kerrigan was actually impressed by Ruth's pitching. He gave him a spot in the starting rotation. Ruth finished the 1915 season 18-8 as a pitcher. As a hitter, he batted .315 and had 4 home runs. The Red Sox won the American League pennant, but with the pitching staff healthy, Ruth was not called upon to pitch in the 1915 World Series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Boston won in 5 games. Ruth was used as a pinch hitter in the game 5, but grounded out against the Phillies ace Grover Cleveland Alexander. Despite his success as a pitcher, Ruth was acquiring a reputation for long home runs. At Sportsman's Park against the St. Louis Browns, a Ruth hit soared over Grand Avenue, breaking the window of a Chevrolet dealership. In 1916, there was attention focused on Ruth for his pitching, as he engaged in repeated pitching duels with the ace of the Washington Senators, Walter Johnson. The two met 5 times during the season, with Ruth winning 4 and Johnson 1. Ruth had no decision in Johnson's victory. 2 of Ruth's victories were by the score of 1-0, one in a 13-inning game, and of the 1-0 shutout decided without extra innings. American League President Van Johnson stated, "That was one of the best ball games I have ever seen." For the season, Ruth went 23-12 with a 1.75 ERA and 9 shutouts, both of which led the league. Ruth's 9 shutouts in 1916 set a league record for left-handers that would remain unmatched until Ron Guidry tied it in 1978. The Red Sox won the pennant and World Series again, this time defeating the Brooklyn Robins, as the Dodgers were then known, in 5 games. Ruth started and won Game 2 2-1 in 14 innings, until another game of that length was played in 2005. That was the longest World Series game, and Ruth's pitching performance is still the longest postseason complete game victory. Kerrigan retired as a player and a manager after 1916, returning to his native Maine to be a businessman. Ruth, who played under 4 managers who are in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, always maintained that Kerrigan, who is not enshrined there, was the best skipper he ever played for. There were other changes in the Red Sox organization that offseason, as Lannon sold the team to a 3-man group headed by New York theatrical promoter Harry Frazee. Jack Berry was hired by the Frazee as manager. Then we have Babe Ruth as he emerged his emergence as a hitter. Ruth went 24-13 with a 2.01 ERA and 6 shutouts in 1917, but the Sox finished in second place in the league, 9 games behind the Chicago White Sox in the standings. On June 23rd at Washington, when home plate umpire Brick Owens called the first 4 pitches as balls, Ruth threw a punch at him and was ejected from the game later and suspended for 10 days and fined $100. Ernie Shore was called to relieve Ruth and was allowed 8 warm-up pitches. The runner who had reached base on the walk was caught stealing, and Shore retired all 26 batters he faced to win the game. Shore's feat was listed as a perfect game for many years. In 1991, Major League Baseball's Committee on Statistical Accuracy amended it to be listed as a combined no-hitter. In 1917, Ruth was used little as a batter other than for his plate appearances while pitching, and hit .325 with 2 home runs. The United States entry into World War I occurred at the start of the season and overshadowed the sport. Conscription was introduced in September of 1917, and most baseball players in the big leagues were of draft age. This included Barry, who was a player manager and who joined the Naval Reserve in an attempt to avoid the draft, only to be called up after the 1917 season. Frazee hired International League president Ed Barrow as a Red Sox manager. Barrow had spent the previous 30 years in a variety of baseball jobs. Though he never played the game professionally, with the major leagues shorthanded due to the war, Barrow had many holes in the Red Sox lineup to fill. Ruth also noticed these vacancies in the lineup and was disqualified in the role of a pitcher who appeared every 4 or 5 days and wanted to play every day at another position. Barrow used Ruth at first base and in the outfield during the exhibition season, but he restricted him to pitching as the team moved toward Boston and the season opener. At that time, Ruth was possibly the best left-handed pitcher in baseball, and allowing him to play another position was an experiment that could have backfired. Inexperienced as a manager, Barrow had player Harry Hooper advise him on baseball gaming strategy. Hooper urged his manager to allow Ruth to play another position when he was not pitching, arguing to Barrow, who had vested in the club, that the crowds were larger on days when Ruth played, as they were attracted by his hitting. Barrow gave in early in May. Ruth promptly hit home runs in 4 consecutive games, one an exhibition, the last of the Walter Johnson. For the first time in his career, disregarding pinch-hitting appearances, Ruth was assigned a place in the batting order higher than 9th. Although Barrow predicted that Ruth would beg to return to pitching the first time he experienced a batting slump, that did not occur. Barrow used Ruth primarily as an outfielder in the war-shortened 1918 season. Ruth hit .300 with 11 home runs, enough to secure him a share of the Major League home run title with Tilly Walker of the Philadelphia Athletics. He was still occasionally used as a pitcher and had a 13-7 record with a 2.22 ERA. In 1918, the Red Sox won their 3rd pennant in 4 years and faced the Chicago Cubs in the World Series, which began on September 5th, the earliest date in history. The season had been shortened because the government had ruled that baseball players who were eligible for the military would have to be inducted or walk in critical war industries such as armament plants. Ruth pitched and won Game 1 of the Red Sox, a 1-0 shutout. Before Game 4, Ruth injured his left hand in a fight, but pitched anyway. He gave up 7 hits and 6 walks, but was helped by outstanding fielding behind him and by his own batting efforts, as a 4th-inning triple by Ruth gave his team a 2-0 lead. The Cubs tied the game in the 8th inning, but the Red Sox scored to take a 3-2 lead again in the bottom of that inning. After Ruth gave up a hit and a walk to start the 9th inning, he was relieved on the mound by Joe Bush. To keep Bush at his bat in the game, he was sent to play left field. Bush retired the side to give Ruth his 2nd win of the series and the 3rd and last World Series pitching victory of his career. Against no defeats in 3 pitching appearances, Ruth's effort gave his team a 3-1 lead, and 2 days later, the Red Sox won their 3rd series in 4 years, 4-2. Before allowing the Cubs to score in Game 4, Ruth pitched 29 2/3 consecutive scoreless innings, a record for the World Series that stood for more than 40 years until 1961, broken by Whitey Ford after Ruth's death. Ruth was prouder of that record than he was of any of his batting feats. With the World Series over, Ruth gained exemption from the war draft by accepting a nominal position with a Pennsylvania steel mill. Many industrial establishments took pride in their baseball teams and sought to hire major leaguers. The end of the war in November set Ruth free to play baseball without such contrivance. During the 1919 season, Ruth was used as a pitcher in only 17 of his 130 games and compiled an 8-5 record. Barrow used him as a pitcher mostly in the early part of the season, when the Red Sox manager still had hopes of a 2nd consecutive pennant. By late June, the Red Sox were clearly out of the race, and Barrow had no objection to Ruth concentrating on his hitting, if only because it drew people to the ballpark. Ruth had hit a home run against the Yankees on opening day and another during a month-long batting slump that soon followed. Relieved of his pitching duties, Ruth began an unprecedented spell of slugging home runs, which gave him widespread public and press attention. Even his failures were seen as majestic, one sport writer said. When Ruth misses a swipe at the ball, the stands quiver. 2 home runs by Ruth on July 5th and 1 in each of 2 consecutive games a week later raised his season total to 11, tying his career best from 1918. The first record to fall was the American League single-season mark of 16, set by Ralph Sox Seibold in 1902. Ruth matched that on July 29th, then pulled ahead toward the Major League record of 25. By Buck Freeman in 1899. By the time Ruth reached this in early September, writers had discovered that Ned Williamson of the 1884 Chicago White Stockings had hit 27 through, though in a ballpark where the distance to right field was only 215 feet. On September 20th, Babe Ruth Day at Fenway Park, Ruth won the game with a home run in the bottom of the 9th inning, tying Williamson. He broke the record 4 days later against the Yankees at the Polo Grounds and hit one more against the Senators to finish with 29. The home run at Washington made Ruth the first Major League player to hit a home run at all 8 ballparks in his league. In spite of Ruth's hitting heroics, the Red Sox finished 6th at 20.5 games behind the league champion White Sox. In his 6 seasons with Boston, he won 89 games and recorded a 2.19 ERA. He had a 4-year stretch where he was second in the American League in wins and ERA behind Walter Johnson, and Ruth had a winning record against Johnson in head-to-head matchups. He was a sidearm drop ball pitcher. Then we had the sale to New York. As an out-of-towner from New York City, Fraze had been regarded with suspicion by Boston sports writers and baseball fans when he bought the team. He won them over with success on the field and with a willingness to build the Red Sox by purchasing or trading for players. He offered the Senators $60,000 for Walter Johnson, but Washington owner Clark Griffith was unwilling. Even so, Frazee was successful in bringing other players to Boston, especially as replacements for players in the military. This willingness to spend for players helped the Red Sox secure the 1918 title. The 1919 season saw record-breaking attendance, and Ruth's home runs for Boston made him a national sensation. In March of 1919, Ruth was reported as having accepted a 3-year contract for a total of $27,000 after protracted negotiations. Nevertheless, on December 26, 1919, Fraze sold Ruth's contract to the New York Yankees. Not all the circumstances concerning the sale are known, but Brewer and former Congressman Jacob Ruppert, the New York team's principal owner, reportedly asked the Yankee manager Miller Huggins what the team needed to be successful. Get Ruth from Boston. Huggins supposedly replied nothing, that Fraze was perennially in need of money to finance his theatrical productions. In any event, there was precedent for the Ruth transaction when Boston pitcher Carl Mays left the Red Sox in a 1919 dispute. Frazee had settled the matter by selling Mays to the Yankees, though over the opposition of the American League president Johnson. According to one of Ruth's biographers, Jim Racer, why Frazee needed cash in 1919 and large infusions of it quickly is still more than 80 years later a bit of a mystery. The often told story is that Frazee needed money to finance the musical No, No, Nanette, which was a Broadway hit and brought Frazee financial security. That play did not open until 1925, however, by which time Frazee had sold the Red Sox. Still, the story may be true in essence. No, No, Nanette was based on a Frazee production play, My Lady Friends, which opened in 1919. There were other financial pressures on Frazee. Despite his team's success, Ruth was fully aware of baseball's popularity and his role in it. Wanted to renegotiate his contract, signed before the 1919 season, for $10,000 per year through 1921. He demanded that his salary be doubled, or he would sit out the season and cash in on his popularity through other venues. Ruth's salary demands were causing other players to ask for more money. Additionally, Frazee still owed Lennon as much as $125,000 from the purchase of the club. Although Ruppert and his co-owner, Colonel Tillinghast Houston, were both wealthy and had aggressively purchased and traded for players in 1918 and 1919 to build a winning team, Ruppert faced losses in his brewing interest as prohibition was implemented, and if the team left the Polo Grounds, where the Yankees were, and the tenants of the New York Giants, building a stadium in New York would be expensive. Nevertheless, when Frazee, who moved in the same social circles as Houston, hinted to the colonel that Ruth was available for the right price, the Yankees owners quickly pursued the purchase. Frazee sold the rights to Babe Ruth for $100,000, the largest sum ever paid for a baseball player. The deal also involved a $350,000 loan from Ruppert to Frazee, secured by a mortgage on Fenway Park, Once it was agreed, Frazee informed Barrow, who, stunned, told the owner that he was getting the worst end of the bargain. Cynics have suggested that Barrow may have played a larger role in the Babe Ruth sale, as less than a year after he became the Yankee general manager, and the following year made a number of purchases of Red Sox players from Frazee. The $100,000 price included $25,000 in cash and notes for the same amount due November 1st in 1920, 21, and 22. Rupert in Houston assisted Frazee in selling the notes to banks for immediate cash. The transaction was contingent on Ruth signing a new contract, which was quickly accomplished. Ruth agreed to fulfill the remaining 2 years of his contract, but was given a $20,000 bonus payable over 2 seasons. The deal was announced on January 6, 1920. Reaction in Boston was mixed. Some fans were embittered at the loss of Ruth. Others conceded that Ruth had become difficult to deal with. The New York Times suggested that the short right field wall at the Polo Grounds should prove an easy target for Ruth next season, and playing 77 games at home. It would not be surprising if Ruth surpassed his home run record of 29 circuit clouts the next summer. According to Ricer, the Yankees had pulled off the sports steal of the century. According to Marty Appel, in his history of the Yankees, their transaction changed the fortunes of 2 high-profile franchises for decades. The Red Sox, winners of 5, the first 16 World Series, and those played between 1903 and 1919, would not win another pennant until 1946, another World Series until 2004, a drought attributed to baseball superstition to Frazee's sale of Ruth, and sometimes dubbed the curse of the Bambino. The Yankees, on the other hand, had not won the American League Championship prior to their acquisition of Ruth. They won 7 American League pennants and 4 World Series with Ruth, and led baseball to 40 pennants and 27 World Series titles in their history. So the New York Yankees from 1920 to 1934, initial success in 1920 to 23, when Ruth signed with the Yankees as he completed his transition from pitcher to a power-hitting outfielder. His 15-season Yankee career consisted of over 2,000 games, and Ruth broke many batting records while making only 5 widely scattered appearances on the mound, winning all of them. At the end of April 1920, the Yankees were 4-7, with the Red Sox leading the league with a 10-2 mark. Ruth had done little, having injured himself swinging the bat. Both situations began to change on May 1st, when Ruth hit a tape measure home run that sent the baseball completely out of the Polo Grounds, a feat believed to have been previously accomplished only by shoeless Joe Jackson. The Yankees won 6-0, taking 3 out of 4 from the Red Sox. Ruth hit his second home run on May 2nd, and the end of the month had set a major league record for home runs in a month with 11, and promptly broke it with 13 in June. Fans responded with record attendance figures. On May 16th, Ruth and the Yankees drew 38,600 to the Polo Grounds, a record for the ballpark, and 15,000 fans were turned away. Large crowds jammed stadiums to see Ruth play when the Yankees were on the road. The home runs kept on coming. Ruth tied his own record of 29 on July 15th and broke it with a home run in both games of the doubleheader 4 days later. By the end of July, he had 37, but his pace slackened somewhat after that. Nevertheless, September 4th, he both tied and broke the organized baseball record for home runs in a season, snapping Perry Worden's 1895 mark of 44 in the minor Western League. The Yankees played well as a team, batting for the league lead early in the summer, but slumped in August in the American League pennant battle with Chicago and Cleveland. The pennant and the World Series were won by Cleveland, who surged ahead after the Black Sox scandal broke on September 28th and led to the suspension of many of Chicago's top players, including shoeless Joe Jackson. The Yankees finished third but drew 1.2 million fans to the Polo Grounds, the first time a team had drawn a seven-figure attendance. The rest of the league sold 600,000 more tickets, many fans there to see Ruth, who led the league with 54 home runs, 158 runs, and 137 RBIs. In 1920 and afterwards, Ruth was aided in the power hitting by the fact that A.J. Reach Company, the maker of baseballs used in the major leagues, was using a more efficient machine to wind the yarn found within the baseball. The new baseballs went into play in 1920 and ushered in the state-of-the-art live ball era. The number of home runs across the major leagues increased by 184 over the previous year. Baseball statistician Bill James pointed out that while Ruth was likely aided by the change in the baseball, there were other factors at work, including the abolition of the spitball, accelerated after the death of Ray Chapman, struck by a pitch ball thrown by Mays in August 1920, and the most frequent use of new baseballs, also a response to Chapman's death. Nevertheless, James theorized that Ruth's 1920 explosion might have happened in 1919 had a full season of 154 games been played rather than 140. Ruth refrained from pitching 133 innings that season, and if he were playing at any other home field but Fenway Park, where he hit only 9 of 29 home runs. Yankees business manager Harry Sparrow had died early in 1920. Rupert and Houston hired Barrow to replace him. The two men quickly made a deal with Fraze for New York to acquire some of the players who would be mainstays in the early Yankee pennant-winning teams, including catcher Wally Shang and pitcher Waite Hoyt. The 21-year-old Hoyt became close to Ruth. The outrageous life fascinated Hoyt. I don't give a shit of free... The don't give a shit freedom of it, the nonstop pell-mell charge into excess. How did a man drink so much and never get drunk? The puzzle of Babe Ruth never was dull, no matter how many times Hoyt picked up the pieces and stared at him. After games, he would allow the crowd to the Babe's suite, no matter what the town. The beer would be iced and bottles would be in the bathtub. Ruth hit home runs early and often in 1921 season, which he broke Roger Connor's mark of home runs in a career at 138. Each of the almost 600 home runs Ruth hit in his career after that extended his own record. After a slow start, the Yankees were soon locked into a tight pennant race with Cleveland, winners of the 1920 World Series. On September 15th, Ruth hit his 55th home run, shattering... Sorry. Had a little pause there. Somebody was trying to call me on the phone. In late September, the Yankees visited Cleveland and won 3 out of 4 games, giving them the upper hand in the race and clinched their first pennant a few days later. Ruth finished the regular season with 59 home runs, battling .378 with a slugging percentage of .846. The Yankees had expectations when they met the New York Giants in the 1921 World Series, every game of which was played in the Polo Grounds. The Yankees won the first 2 games with Ruth in the lineup. However, Ruth badly scraped his elbow during Game 2 when he slid into third base and walked. He had walked and stolen both second and third bases. After the game, he was told by the team physician not to play the rest of the series. Despite this advice, he did play the next 3 games and pinch hit Game 8 of the best-of-9 series, but the Yankees lost 5 games to 3. Ruth hit .316 and drove in 5 runs and hit his first World Series home run. After the series, Ruth and teammates Bob Musial and Bob Piercy participated in a barnstorming tour of the Northeast. A rule then in force prohibited World Series participants from playing in exhibition games during the off-season, the purpose being to prevent series participants from replicating the series and undermining its value. Baseball Commissioner Keenshaw Mountains Landis suspended the trio until May 20th, 1922, and fined them their 1921 World Series checks. In August 1922, the rule was changed to allow limited barnstorming for World Series participants, with Landis's permission required. On March 6, 1922, Ruth signed a new contract for 3 years at $52,000 a year, equivalent to $778,346 in 2018. This was more than 2 times the largest sum ever paid to a ball player up to that point, and it represented 40% of the team's player payroll. Despite his suspension, Ruth was named the Yankees' new on-field captain prior to the 1922 season. During his suspension, he worked out with the team in the morning and played exhibition games with the Yankees on their days off. He and Musial returned on May 20th to a sellout crowd at the Polo Grounds, but Ruth batted 0 for 4 and was booed. On May 25th, he was thrown out of the game for throwing dust in umpire George Hildebrand's face and then climbed into the stands to confront a heckler. Ban Johnson ordered him fired, suspended, and stripped of position as team captain. In the shortened season, Ruth appeared in 110 games, batted .315 with 35 home runs and drove in 99 runs, but the 1922 season was a disappointment in comparison to his 2 previous dominating years. Despite Ruth's off year, the Yankees managed to win the pennant and faced the New York Giants in the World Series for the 2nd consecutive year. In the series, Giants manager John McGraw instructed his pitchers to throw him nothing but curveballs, and Ruth never adjusted. Ruth had 2 hits in 17 at-bats, and the Yankees lost to the Giants for the 2nd straight year by 4 games to none, with only 1 tie game. Sports writer Joe Villa called him an exploded phenomenon. After the season, Ruth was a guest at an Elks Club banquet set up by Ruth's agent with Yankee team support. There, each speaker, concluding with future New York Mayor Jimmy Walker, censured him for his poor behavior and emotional. Ruth promised reform, and to the surprise of many, followed through. When he reported to spring training, he was in his best shape as a Yankee, weighing only 210 pounds. The Yankees' status as tenants of the Giants at the Polo Grounds had become increasingly uneasy, and in 1922 the Giants owner Charles Stillman said the Yankees' lease expiring was expiring after that season would not be renewed. Rupert and Hudson had long contemplated a new stadium and had taken an option on property at 161st Street and River Avenue in the Bronx. Yankee Stadium was completed in time for the home opener on April 18, 1923, at which Ruth hit the first home run in what was quickly dubbed the house that Ruth built. The ballpark was designed with Ruth in mind, although venue's left field fence was further from home plate than the Polo Grounds. Yankee Stadium's right field fence was closer, making home runs easier to hit for left-handed batters. To spare Ruth's eyes, right field, his defensive position was not pointed into the afternoon sun, as was traditional. Left fielder Musil was soon suffering headaches from squinting toward home plate. During the 1923 season, the Yankees were never seriously challenged and won by the American League pennant by 17 games. Ruth finished the season with a career-high .393 batting average and 41 home runs, which tied Cy Williams for the most in major leagues that year. Ruth hit a career high 45 doubles in 1923 and reached base 379 times, then a major league record. For the third straight year, the Yankees faced the Giants in the World Series, which Ruth dominated. He batted .368, walked 8 times, scored 8 runs and 3 home runs, and slugged .000 during the series. As the Yankees christened their new stadium with their first World Series championship 4-2. Okay, I gotta take a brief intermission here real quick. Please do me a favor and tell people I will be right back, okay? Sorry about this. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, my wife was trying to get in touch with me, and I wanted to let her know I was I was live streaming. Sorry, guys. Okay, let me continue on here. So, batting title and bellyache, 1924 through 1925. So in 1924, the Yankees were favored to become the first team to win 4 consecutive pennants. Plagued by injuries, they found themselves in a battle with the Senators. Although the Yankees won 18 of 22 at one point in September, the Senators beat out the Yankees by 2 games. Ruth hit .378, winning his only AL batting title with a league-leading 46 home runs. Ruth had kept up his efforts to stay in shape in 1923 and 1924, but by early 1925 weighed nearly 260 pounds. His annual visit to Hot Springs, Arkansas, where he exercised and took saunas early in the year, did him no good, as he spent much of the time carousing in the resort town. He became ill while there and suffered relapses during spring training. Ruth collapsed in Asheville, North Carolina, as the team journeyed north, and he was put on a train for New York, where he was briefly hospitalized. A rumor circulated that he had died, prompting British newspapers to print a premature obituary. In New York, Ruth collapsed again and was found unconscious in his hotel room. He was taken to a hospital where he suffered multiple convulsions. After sports writer W.O. McGeegan wrote that Ruth's illness was due to binging on hot dogs and soda pop before a game, became known as the bellyache heard around the world. However, the exact cause of his ailment has never been confirmed and remains a mystery. Glenn Stout, in his History of the Yankees, writes that Ruth's legend is still one of the most sheltered in sports. He suggests that alcohol was the root of Ruth's illness, pointing to the fact that Ruth remained 6 weeks in St. Vincent's Hospital, but was allowed to leave under supervision for workouts and with the team for part of that time. He concludes that hospitalization was behavior related. Playing just 98 games, Ruth had his worst season as a Yankee. He finished with a .290 average and 25 home runs. The Yankees finished next to last in the AL American League with 69 and 85 record, their last season with a losing record until 1965. Murderers Row, 1926 to 1928. Ruth spent part of the offseason in 1925 and 1926 working out with Artie McGovern's gym, where he got back into shape. Barrow and Huggins had rebuilt the team and surrounded the veteran core with good young players like Tony Lazzari and Lou Gehrig, but the Yankees were not expected to win the pennant. Ruth returned to his normal production during 1926 when he batted .372 with 47 home runs and 146 RBIs. The Yankees built a 10-game lead by mid-June and coasted to win the pennant by 3 games. The St. Louis Cardinals had won the National League and the lowest winning percentage for a pennant winner to that point, .578, and the Yankees were expected to win the World Series easily. Although the Yankees won the opener and the New York-St. Louis games 2 and 3, in Game 4, Ruth hit 3 home runs, the first time this has been done in a World Series game, to lead the Yankees to victory. In the 5th game, Ruth caught a ball as he crashed into the fence. The play was described by baseball writers as a defensive gem. New York took that game, but Grover Cleveland Alexander won Game 6 for St. Louis to tie the series at 3 games each. Then got very drunk. He was nevertheless inserted into Game 7 in the 7th inning and shut down the Yankees to win the game 3-2 and win the series. Ruth had hit his 4th home run of the series earlier in the game and was the only Yankee to reach base off Alexander. He walked in the 9th inning before being thrown out to end the game when he attempted to steal second base. Although Ruth's attempt to steal is often deemed a base runner blunder, Creamer pointed out that the Yankees' chances of tying a game would have been greatly improved with a runner in scoring position. The 1926 World Series was also known for Ruth's promise to Johnny Sylvester, a hospitalized 11-year-old boy. Ruth promised the child that he would hit a home run on his behalf. Sylvester had been injured in a fall from a horse, and a friend of Sylvester's gave the boy 2 autographed baseballs signed by Yankees and Cardinals. The friend relayed a promise from Ruth, who did not know the boy, that he would hit a home run for him. After the series, Ruth visited the boy in the hospital. When the matter became public, the press greatly inflated it, and by some accounts, Ruth allegedly saved the boy's life by visiting him, emotionally promising to hit a home run and doing so. The 1927 New York Yankees team, considered one of the greatest squads to ever take the field, known as Murderers Row because of the power of its lineup. The team clinched first place on Labor Day and won the American League record 110 games and took the American League pennant by 19 games. There was no suspense in the pennant race, and the nation turned its attention to Ruth's pursuit of his single-season home run record of 59 round-trippers. Ruth was not alone in this chase. Teammate Lou Gehrig proved to be a slugger who was capable of challenging Ruth for his home run crown. He tied Ruth with 24 home runs late in June. Through July and August, the dynamic duo was never separated by more than 2 home runs. Gehrig took the lead 45-44 in the first game of a doubleheader at Fenway Park in September. Ruth responded with 2 blasts of his own to take the lead, as it proved permanently. Gehrig finished with 47. Even so, as September 6th, Ruth was several games off his 1921 pace, and going into the final series against the Senators had only 57. He hit 2 in the first game of the series, including 1 off Paul Hopkins, facing his first major league batter to tie the record. The following day, September 30th, he broke it with his 60th home run in the 8th inning off Tom Zachary to break a 2-2 tie. 60. Let's see some son of a bitch try to top that one, Ruth excluded after the game. In addition to his career high 60 home runs, Ruth batted .356 and drove in 164 runs and slugged a .772. In the 1927 World Series, the Yankees swept the Pittsburgh Pirates in 4 games. The National Leaguers were disheartened after watching the Yankees take batting practice before Game 1, with ball after ball leaving Forbes Field. According to the Appel, the 1927 New York Yankees, even today, the words inspire awe. All baseball success is measured against the 27 team. The following season started off well for the Yankees, who led the league in the early going, but the Yankees were plagued by injuries, erratic pitching, and inconsistent play. The Philadelphia Athletics, rebuilding after some lean years, erased the Yankees' big lead and even took over first place briefly in early September. The Yankees, however, regained first place when they beat the Athletics 3 out of 4 games in a pivotal series at Yankee Stadium later that month, and clinched the pennant in the final weekend of the season. Ruth's play in 1928 mirrored his team's performance. He got off to a hot start, and on August 1st, he had 42 home runs. This put him ahead of his 60 home run pace from the previous season. Then he slumped for the latter part of the season, and he hit 12 home runs in the last 2 months. Ruth's batting average fell to .323, well below his career average. Nevertheless, he ended the season with 54 home runs. The Yankees swept the favored Cardinals in 4 games in the World Series, with Ruth batting .625 and hitting 3 home runs in Game 4, including 1 off Alexander. Called shot and final Yankee years, 1929 to 1934. Before the 1929 season, Rupert, who had bought out Houston in 1923, announced that the Yankees would wear uniform numbers to allow fans a cavernous Yankee Stadium to easily identify the players. The Cardinals and Indians had each experimented with uniform numbers. The Yankees were the first to use them on both home and away uniforms. Ruth batted third and was given number 3. According to a long-standing baseball legend, the Yankees adopted their now ionic pinstriped uniforms in hopes of making Ruth look slimmer. In truth, though, they had been wearing pinstripes since Rupert bought the team in 1915. Although the Yankees started well, the Athletics soon proved they were the better team in 1929, splitting 2 series with the Yankees in the first month of the season, then taking advantage of a Yankee losing streak in mid-May to gain first place. Although Ruth performed well, the Yankees were not able to catch the Athletics. Connie Mack had built another great team. Tragedy struck the Yankees late in the year as manager Huggins died at 51 of erysipelas, a bacterial skin infection, on September 25th, only 10 days after he had last directed the team. Despite their past differences, Ruth praised Higgins and described him as a great guy. The Yankees finished second, 18 games behind the Athletics. Ruth hit .345 during the season with 46 home runs and 154 RBIs. On October 17th, the Yankees hired Bob Shockey as manager, and he was their 4th choice. Ruth had politicked for the job of player manager, but Rupert and Barrow never seriously considered him for the position. Stout deemed at his first hint Ruth would have no future with the Yankees once he retired as a player. Shockey informed the Yankees player and teammate of Ruth would prove unable to command Ruth's respect. On January 7, 1930, salary negotiations between the Yankees and Ruth quickly broke down. Having just concluded a 3-year contract with an annual salary of $70,000, Ruth promptly rejected both the Yankees' initial proposal of $70,000 for 1 year and their final offer of 2 years at $75,000, the latter figure equaling the annual salary of then U.S. President Herbert Hoover. Instead, Ruth demanded at least $85,000 and 3 years. When asked why he thought he was worth more than the President of the United States, Ruth replied, "Say, if I hadn't been sick last summer, I'd have broken hell out of that home run record. Besides, the President gets a 4-year contract. I'm only asking for 3. Exactly 2 months later, a compromise was reached, and Ruth settled for 2 years at an unprecedented $80,000 per year. Ruth's salary was more than 2.4 times greater than the next highest salary that season, a record margin as of 2019. In 1930, Ruth hit .359 with 49 home runs, his best in his years after 1928, and 153 RBIs, and pitched his first game in 9 years, a complete game victory. Nevertheless, the athletes won their 2nd consecutive pennant and World Series. As the Yankees finished in 3rd place, 16 games back, at the end of the season, Shockey was fired and replaced with Cubs manager Joe McCarthy, though Ruth again unsuccessfully sought the job. McCarthy was a disciplinarian, but chose not to interfere with Ruth, who did not seek conflict with the manager. The team improved in 1931, but was no match for the Athletics, who won 107 games, 13 and a half games in front of the Yankees. Ruth, for his part, hit .373 with 46 home runs and 163 RBIs. He had 31 doubles, his most since 1924. In the 1932 season, the Yankees went 107-47 and won the pennant. Ruth's effectiveness had decreased somewhat, but he still hit .341 with 41 home runs and 137 RBIs. Nevertheless, he was sidelined twice due to injuries that season. The Yankees faced the Cubs, McCarthy's former team, in the 1932 World Series. There was bad blood between the two teams as the Yankees resented the Cubs, only awarding half a World Series share to Mark Koenig, a former Yankee. The games at Yankee Stadium had not been sellouts. Both were won by the home team, with Ruth collecting 2 singles but scoring runs as he was walked 4 times by the Cubs pitchers. In Chicago, Ruth was resentful at the hostile crowds that met the Yankees train and jeered them at the hotel. The crowd for the Game 3 included New York Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt and the Democratic candidate for president, who sat with Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. Many in the crowd threw lemons at Ruth, a sign of derision, and others, as well as the Cubs themselves, shouted abuse at Ruth and other Yankees. They were briefly silenced when Ruth hit a 3-run home run off Charlie Root in the first inning, but soon revived the Cubs, tied and the score at 4-4 in the 4th inning, partly due to Ruth's fielding error in the outfield. When Ruth came to the plate in the top of the 5th, the Chicago crowd and players, led by pitcher Gary Bush, were screaming insults at Ruth. With the count at 2 balls and 1 strike, Ruth gestured possibly the direction of center field, and after the next pitch, a strike, may have pointed there with one hand. Ruth hit the 5th pitch over the center field fence. Estimates were that it traveled nearly 500 feet. Whether or not Ruth intended to indicate where he planned to and did hit the ball, Charlie Devens, who in 1999 was interviewed as Ruth's surviving teammate in that game, did not think so. The incident has gone down in legend as Babe Ruth's called shot. The Yankees won Game 3 and the following day clinched the series with another victory. During that game, Bush hit Ruth on the arm with a pitch, causing words to be exchanged and provoking a game-winning Yankee rally. Ruth remained productive in 1933. He batted .301 with 34 home runs, 103 RBIs, and a league-leading 114 walks. As the Yankees finished in second place, 7 games behind the Senators, Athletics manager Connie Mack selected him to play right field in the first Major League Baseball All-Star Game held on July 6, 1933, at Comiskey Park in Chicago. He hit the first home run in the All-Star Game's history, a two-run blast against Bill Hallahan during the 3rd inning, which helped the American League win the game 4-2. During the final game of the 1933 season, as a publicity stunt organized by his team, Ruth was called upon and pitched a complete game victory against the Red Sox in his final appearance as a pitcher. Despite unremarkable pitching numbers, Ruth had a 5-0 record in 5 games for the Yankees, raising his career total to 94 and 46. In 1934, Ruth played his last full season with the Yankees. By this time, years of high living were starting to catch up with him. His conditioning had deteriorated to the point that he could no longer field or run. He accepted a pay cut to $35,000 from Rupert, but he was still the highest paid player in the major leagues. He could still handle a bat and recorded a .288 batting average with 22 home runs. These were statistics that Riesler described as merely mortal. Ruth was selected to the All-Star team for the 2nd consecutive year, even though he was in the twilight of his career. During the game, New York Giants pitcher Carl Hubbard struck out Ruth and four other future Hall of Famers consecutively. The Yankees finished second again, 7 games behind the Tigers. So with the Boston Braves in 1935. Although Ruth knew he was nearly finished as a player, he desired to remain in baseball as a manager. He was often spoken of as possible candidates for managerial jobs that opened up, but in 1932 he was mentioned as a contender for the Boston position. Ruth stated that he was not yet ready to leave the field. There were rumors that Ruth was likely a candidate each time when the Cleveland Indians, the Cincinnati Reds, and Detroit Tigers were looking for a manager, but nothing came of them. Before the 1934 season, Rupert offered to make Ruth the manager of the Yankees' top minor league team, the New York Bears, but he was talked out of it by his wife, Claire, and his business manager, Christy Walsh. Shortly afterward, Tigers owner Frank Navin made a proposal to Rupert and Barrow. If the Yankees trade Ruth to Detroit, Navin would name Ruth player manager. Navin believed Ruth would not only bring a winning attitude to a team that had not finished higher than third since 1923, but would also revive the Tigers' staggering attendance figures. Navin asked Ruth to come to Detroit for an interview. However, Ruth balked, since Walsh had already arranged for him to take part in a celebrity golf tournament in Hawaii. Ruth and Navin negotiated over the phone with Ruth while Ruth was in Hawaii, but those talks foundered when Navin refused to give Ruth a portion of the Tigers' box office proceeds. Early in the 1934 season, Ruth openly campaigned to become the Yankees manager. However, the Yankee job was never a serious possibility. Rupert always supported McCarthy, who would remain in his position for another 12 seasons. The relationship between Ruth and McCarthy had been lukewarm at best, and Ruth's managerial ambitions further chilled their interpersonal relations. By the end of the season, Ruth hinted that he would retire unless Rupert named him manager of the Yankees. When the time came, Rupert wanted Ruth to leave the team without drama or hard feelings. During the 1934-35 off-season, Ruth circled the world with his wife. The trip included a barnstorming tour of the Far East. At his final stop in the United Kingdom before returning home, Ruth was introduced to cricket by Australian player Alan Fairfax, and after having little luck in a cricketer's stance, he stood as a baseball batter and launched some massive shots around the field, destroying the bat in the process. Although Fairfield regretted that he could not have the time to make Ruth a cricket player, Ruth had lost any interest in such a career upon learning that the best batsmen made only about $40 per week. Also during the off-season, Rupert had been sounding out the other clubs in hopes of finding one that would be willing to take Ruth as a manager or a player. However, the only serious offer came from the Athletics owner-manager Connie Mack, who gave some thought to stepping down as manager in favor of Ruth. However, Mack later dropped the idea, saying that Ruth's wife would be running the team in a month if Ruth ever took over. While the barnstorming tour was underway, Rupert began negotiating with the Boston Braves owner, Judge Emil Fuchs, who wanted Ruth as a gate attraction. The Braves enjoyed modest recent success, finishing fourth in the National League in both 1933 and 1934, but the team drew poorly at the box office. Unable to afford the rent at Braves Field, Fuchs had considered holding dog races there when the Braves were not at home, only to be turned down by Landis. After a series of phone calls, letters, and meetings, the Yankees traded Ruth to the Braves on February 26, 1935. Rupert had stated that he would not release Ruth to go to another team as a full-time player. For this reason, it was announced that Ruth would become a team vice president and would be consulted on all club transactions. In addition to playing, he was also made the assistant manager to Brave skipper Bill McKenney. In a long letter to Ruth a few days before the press conference, Fuchs promised Ruth a share in the Braves' profits, with the possibility of becoming co-owner of the team. Fuchs also raised the possibility of Ruth succeeding McKenna in as early as 1936. Rupert called the deal the greatest opportunity Ruth had ever had. There was considerable attention as Ruth reported for spring training. He did not hit his first home run of the spring training until after the team had left Florida and was beginning the road north to Savannah. He hit two in an exhibition game against the Bears. Amid much press attention, Ruth played his first game in Boston in over 16 years before an opening day crowd of over 25,000, including 5 of New England's 6 state governors. Ruth accounted for all the Braves' runs in a 4-2 defeat of the New York Giants, hitting a two-run home run, singling to drive a third run, and later in the inning scoring the fourth. Although age and weight had slowed him, he made a running catch in left field that the sports writers deemed the defensive highlight of the game. Ruth had 2 hits in the second game of the season, but it quickly went downhill both for him and the Braves from there. The season soon settled down with a routine of Ruth performing poorly on a few occasions, he even played at all. As April passed into May, Ruth's physical deterioration became even more pronounced. While he remained productive at the plate early on, he could do little else. His conditioning had become so poor that he could barely trot around the bases. He made so many errors that 3 Braves pitchers told McKenna they would not take the mound if he was in the lineup. Before long, Ruth stopped hitting as well. He grew increasingly annoyed at McKenna, ignored most of his advice. For his part, McKenna later said Ruth's huge salary and refusal to stay with the team while on the road made it nearly impossible to enforce discipline. The Braves' deterioration mirrored that of Ruth's. Their opening day win was the only time they were above 500 all year. Ruth soon realized that Fuchs had deceived him and had no intention of making him manager or giving him any significant off-field duties. He later said only his duties as vice president consisted of making public appearances and autographing tickets. Ruth also found out that far from giving him a share of the profits, Fuchs wanted him to invest some of his money in the team in a last-ditch effort to improve its balance sheet. As it turned out, Fuchs and Rupert had both known all along Ruth's non-playing positions were meaningless. By the end of the first month of the season, Ruth concluded he was finished even as part-time player. As early as May 12th, he had asked Fuchs to let him retire. Ultimately, Fuchs persuaded Ruth to remain at least until after the Memorial Day doubleheader in Pennsylvania. In the interim, as a Western road trip at which the rival teams had scheduled days to honor him. In Chicago and St. Louis, Ruth performed poorly and his batting average sank to 155, with only 2 additional home runs for a total of these on the season so far. He only had a total of 3 on the season so far. In the first 2 games in Pittsburgh, Ruth had only 1 hit, though a long fly caught by Paul Wainer probably would have been a home run in any other ballpark besides Forbes Field. Ruth played in the 3rd game of the Pittsburgh series on May 25, 1935, and added one more tale to his playing legend. Ruth went 4 for 4, including 3 home runs, though the Braves lost the game 11-7. The last 2 were off Ruth's old Cubs nemesis, Guy Bush. The final home run, both of the game and of Ruth's career, sailed out of the park over the right field upper deck, the first time anyone had hit a fair ball completely out of Forbes Field. Ruth was urged to make this his last game, but he had given his word to Fuchs and played in Cincinnati and Philadelphia. The first game of the doubleheader in Pennsylvania, the Braves lost both, was his final major league appearance. Ruth retired on June 2nd after an argument with Fuchs. He finished 1935 with a 181 average, easily his worst as a full-time player, and the final 6 of his 714 home runs. The Braves 10-27 when Ruth left finished 38 and 115. 248, the worst winning percentage in modern National League history. Insolvent like his team, Fuchs gave up control of the Braves before the end of the season. The National League took over the franchise at the end of the year. Of the 5 members of the inaugural class of Baseball Hall of Fame in 1936, Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, Walter Johnson, and Babe Ruth himself. Only Ruth was not given an offer to manage a baseball team. Hold on just a second. I gotta take a sip of water here. Oh, well, yeah, it is. It's after 12 o'clock. All right. So now we get into his retirement. We're almost finishing up here, just in case you're wondering. Getting a lot closer, that's for sure. So his retirement. Although Fuchs had given Ruth an unconditional release, no major league team expressed an interest in hiring him in any capacity. Ruth still hoped to be hired as a manager if he could not play anymore, but only one managerial position, Cleveland, became available between Ruth's retirement and the end of 1937. Asked if he had considered Ruth for the job, the Indians' owner, Alva Bravely, replied negatively. The writer Creamer believed Ruth was unfairly treated and never being given an opportunity to manage a major league club. The author believed that there was not necessarily a relationship between personal conduct and managerial success. Nothing that McGraw, Billy Martin, and Billy Valentine were winners despite character flaws. Team owners and general managers assessed Ruth's flamboyant personal habits as a reason to exclude him from managerial job. Barrow said of him, "How can he manage other men when he can't even manage himself?" Ruth played much golf and in a few exhibition baseball games, where he demonstrated a continuing ability to draw large crowds. This appeal contributed to the Dodgers hiring him as first base coach in 1938. When Ruth was hired, Brooklyn general manager Larry MacPhail made it clear that Ruth would not be considered for the manager's job if, as expected, Burley Grimes retired at the end of the season. Although much was said about what Ruth could teach younger players in practice, his duties were to appear on the field in uniform and encourage base runners. He was not called upon to relay signs. Indeed, his most newsworthy accomplishment during this period was hitting a 430-foot home run and thus earning the $50 grand prize in a pre-game distance hitting contest at Sportsman's Park on July 24th. Ruth got along well, and everyone except team captain Leo DeRocha was hired as Grimes' replacement at season's end. Ruth then left his job as first base coach and would never again work in any capacity in the game of baseball. On July 4th, 1939, Ruth spoke at Lou Gehrig's Appreciation Day at Yankee Stadium as a member of the 1927 Yankees, and a sellout crowd turned out to honor their first baseman, who was forced into premature retirement by the ALS, which would kill him 2 years later. The next week, Ruth went to Cooperstown, New York, for the formal opening of the Baseball Hall of Fame. 3 years earlier, he was one of the first 5 players elected into the Hall. As radio broadcasts of baseball games became popular, Ruth sought a job in that field, arguing that his celebrity and knowledge of baseball would assure large audiences, but he received no offers. During World War II, he made many personal appearances to advance the war effort, including his last appearance as a player at Yankee Stadium. In a 1943 exhibition for the Army Navy Relief Fund, he hit a long ball off Walter Johnson. The blast left the field. Curving foul, but Ruth circled the bases anyway. In 1946, he made a final effort to gain a job in baseball when he contacted new Yankees boss McPhail, but he was sent a rejection letter. In 1999, Ruth's granddaughter, Lindy Tassetti, and his stepdaughter, Julia Ruth Stevens, said that Babe's inability to land a managerial role with the Yankees caused him to feel hurt and slump into a severe depression. The other 4 original players in the Hall were all offered managerial or coaching roles with an MLB team, which all accepted. As far as his personal life, Ruth met Helen Woodford in 1897 to 1929. By some accounts, in a coffee shop in Boston where she was a waitress, and they were married as teenagers on October 17, 1914. Although Ruth later claimed to have been married in Elkton, Maryland, records show that they were married in St. Paul's Catholic Church in Elliott City. They adopted a daughter, Dorothy. She lived from 1921 to 1989. In 1921, Ruth and Helen separated around 1925, reportedly due to his repeated infidelities and neglect. They appeared in public as a couple for the last time during the 1926 World Series. Helen died in January 1929 at the age of 31 in a house in Watertown, Massachusetts, in a house owned by Edward Kinder, a dentist with whom she had been living as Mrs. Kinder in her book, My Dad, the Babe. Dorothy claimed that she was Ruth's biological child by a mistress named Juanita Jennings. Juanita admitted to this fact to Dorothy and Julia Ruth Stevens, her stepdaughter, in 1980, who was at the time already very ill. She died in 1989. On April 17, 1929, only 3 months after the death of his first wife, Ruth married actress and model Claire Merritt Hodgson and adopted her daughter, Julia. It was the second and final marriage for both parties. Claire, much unlike Helen, was well-traveled and educated, went on to put structure into Babe's life like Miller Hughes did with him on the field. By one account, Julia and Dorothy were, through no fault of their own, the reason for the 7-year rift in Ruth's relationship with teammate Lou Gehrig. Sometime in 1932, during a conversation that she assumed was private, Gehrig's mother remarked, "It's a shame Claire doesn't dress Dorothy as nicely as she dresses her own daughter." When the comment inevitably got back to Ruth, he angrily told Gehrig to tell his mother to mind her own business. Gehrig, in turn, took offense at what he perceived as Ruth's comment about his mother. The 2 men reportedly never spoke off the field until they reconciled at Yankee Stadium on Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day, July 4, 1939, which was shortly after Gehrig's retirement from baseball. Although Ruth was married throughout most of his baseball career, when team co-owner Tillinghast Cap Houston asked him to tone down his lifestyle, the player said, "I'll promise to go easier on drinking and to get to bed earlier, but not for you. $50,000 or $250,000 will I give up women, They're too much fun. Before the start of the 1922 season, Ruth had signed a 3-year contract at $52,000 per year with an option to renew for 2 additional years. His performance during the 22 season had been disappointing, a tribute in part to his drinking and late night hours. After the end of the 1922 season, he was asked to sign a contract addendum with a morals clause. Ruth and Rupert signed it on November 11, 1922. It called for Ruth to abstain entirely from use of intoxicating liquors and to not stay up later than 1 a.m. during the training and playing season without permission of the manager. Ruth was also enjoined from any action or misbehavior that would compromise his ability to play baseball. So his cancer and death, which started in 1946 through 1948. As early as the war years, doctors had cautioned Ruth to take better care of his health, and he grudgingly followed their advice, limiting his drinking and not going on a proposed trip to support the troops in the South Pacific. In 1946, Ruth began experiencing severe pain over his left eye and had difficulty swallowing. In November 1946, Ruth entered the French hospital in New York for tests, which revealed that he had an inoperable malignant tumor at the base of his skull and his neck. The lesion was known as nasopharyngeal carcinoma, or lymphopitlemia. His name and fame gave him access to experimental treatments, and he was one of the first cancer patients to receive both drugs and radiation treatment simultaneously. Having lost 80 pounds, he was discharged from the hospital in February and went to Florida to recuperate. He returned to New York Yankee Stadium after the season started. The new commissioner, Happy Chandler, Judge Landis, had died in 1944, proclaimed April 27, 1947 as Babe Ruth Day around the major leagues, with the most significant observance to be at Yankee Stadium. A number of teammates and other spokesmen spoke in honor of Ruth, who briefly addressed the crowd of almost 60,000 people. By then, his voice was a soft whisper and a very low, raspy tone. Around this time, developments in chemotherapy offered some hope for Ruth, but doctors had not told Ruth he had cancer because of his family's fear that he might harm himself. They treated him with Teraterin, a folic acid derivative. He may have been the first human subject. Ruth showed dramatic improvement during the summer of 1947, so much that his case was presented by doctors as scientific meeting. Without using his name, he was able to travel around the country doing promotional work for the Ford Company on American Legion Baseball. He appeared again at another day in his honor at Yankee Stadium in September, but was not well enough to pitch in an old-timers game as he had hoped. The improvement was only a temporary remission, and by late 1947, Ruth was unable to help with the writing of his biography, The Babe Ruth Story, which was almost entirely ghost-written in and out of the hospital in Manhattan. He left for Florida in February 1948, doing what activities he could. After 6 weeks, he returned to New York to appear at a book signing party. He also traveled to California to witness the filming of the movie based on his book. On June 5, 1948, as a gaunt and hollowed-out Ruth visited Yale University to donate a manuscript, The Babe Ruth Story, to its library. At Yale, he met with future President George H.W. Bush, who was the captain of the Yale baseball team. On June 13th, Ruth visited Yankee Stadium for his final time in his life, appearing at the 25th anniversary celebrations celebrations of the house that Ruth built. By this time, he had lost much weight, and had difficulty walking. Introduced along with his surviving teammates from 1923, Ruth used a bat as a cane. Nate Fiend's photo of Ruth taken from behind, standing near the plate and facing Ruthville right field, became one of baseball's most famous and widely circulated photographs and won the Pulitzer Prize. Ruth made one final trip on behalf of the American League Baseball, then entered Memorial Hospital where he would die. He was never told he had cancer, but before his death had surmised it. He was able to leave the hospital for a few short trips, including a final visit to Baltimore on July 26, 1948. Ruth left the hospital to attend the premiere of the film The Babe Ruth Story. Shortly thereafter, Ruth returned to the hospital for the final time. He was barely able to speak. Ruth's condition was gradually growing worse. Only a few visitors were allowed to see him, one of whom was National League president and future commissioner of baseball, Ford Frick. Ruth was so thin it was unbelievable. He had been such a big man, and his arms were just skinny little bones. His face was so haggard, Frick said years later. Thousands of New Yorkers, including many children, stood vigil outside the hospital during Ruth's final days. On August 16, 1948, at 8:01 p.m., Ruth died in his sleep at the age of 53. His open casket was placed on display in the rotunda of Yankee Stadium, where it remained for 2 days. 77,000 people filed past to pay him tribute. His funeral took place at St. Patrick's Cathedral. A crowd estimated at 75,000 waited outside. Ruth was buried on a hillside, section 25, at the Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Hawthorne, New York. An epitaph by Cardinal Spellman appears on his headstone. His second wife, Claire Merritt Ruth, would be interned with him 28 years later in 1976. So his memorial and museum. On April 19, 1949, the Yankees unveiled a granite monument in Ruth's honor in center field of Yankee Stadium. The monument was located in the field of play, next to a flagpole with similar tributes to Huggins and Gehrig, until the stadium was remodeled from 1974 to 1975, which resulted in the outfield fences moving inward and enclosing the monuments from the playing field. This area was known thereafter as Monument Park. Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built, was replaced after the 2008 season with a new Yankee Stadium across the street from the old one. Monument Park was subsequently moved to the new venue behind the center field fence. Ruth's uniform number 3 has been retired by the Yankees, and he is one of 5 Yankee players or managers to have a granite monument within the stadium. The Babe Ruth Birthplace Museum is located at 216 Emory Street, a Baltimore row house where Ruth was born, and 3 blocks west of Oriole Park at Camden Yards, where the American League's Baltimore Orioles play. The property was restored and opened to the public in 1973 by nonprofit Babe Ruth Birthplace Foundation, Incorporated. Ruth's widow, Claire, his 2 daughters, Dorothy and Julia, and his sister, Mamie, helped select the installs exhibits for the museum. His contemporary impact. Ruth was the first baseball star to be subject of overwhelming public adulation. Baseball had been known for star players such as Ty Cobb and shoeless Joe Jackson, but both men had uneasy relations with the fans. In Cobb's case, the incidents were sometimes marked by violence. Ruth's biographers agreed that he benefited from the timing of his ascension to home run king. The country had been hit hard by both the war and the 1918 flu epidemic, and longed for something to help put these traumas behind it. Ruth also resonated in a country which felt an aftermath of the war, that it took second place to no one. Montville argued that Ruth was a larger-than-life figure who was capable of unprecedented athletic feats in the nation's largest city. Ruth became an icon of the social changes that marked the early 1920s. In his history of the Yankees, Glenn Stout writes that Ruth was New York's incarnate, uncouth and raw, flamboyant and flashy, oversized, out of scale, and absolutely unstoppable. During his lifetime, Ruth had become a symbol of the United States. During World War II, Japanese soldiers could think of no greater insult than to yell in English, "To hell with Babe Ruth." To anger American soldiers, Ruth replied that he hoped every Jap that mentioned my name gets shot. Creamer recorded that Babe transcended sport and moved far beyond the artificial limits of baselines and outfield fences in sports pages. Wakeheim stated he appealed to a deeply rooted American yearning for the definitive climax, clean, quick, and unarguable. According to Glenn Stout, Ruth's home runs were exalted, uplifting experiences that meant more to fans than any runs they were responsible for. A Babe Ruth home run was an event unto itself, one that meant anything was possible. Ruth's penchant for hitting home runs altered how baseball is played. Prior to 1920, home runs were unusual, and managers tried to win games by getting a runner on base and bringing him around to score through such means as stolen base, the bunt, and the hit and run. Advocates for what was dubbed inside baseball, such as Giants manager McGraw, disliked the home run, considering it a blot on the purity of the game. According to a sports writer, W.A. Phelan, after the 1920 season, Ruth's breakout performance that season and the response in excellent excitement and attendance settled for all to come that the American public is nuttier over the home run than clever fielding or the hitless pitching. Viva el Home Run and 2 times Viva Babe Ruth, exponent of the home run and overshadowing star, Bill James states, when the owners discovered that the fans liked to see home runs, and when the foundations of the games were simultaneously imperiled by disgrace in the black box scandal, then there were no turning back. While a few, such as McGraw and Cobb, decreed the passing of the old-style play, the teams quickly began to see development sluggers. According to contemporary sports writer Grantland Rice, only 2 sports figures in the 1920s approached Ruth in popularity: boxer Jack Dempsey and racehorse Man O'War. One of the factors that contributed to Ruth's broad appeal was the uncertainty about his family and early life. Ruth appeared to exemplify the American success story, that even an uneducated, unsophisticated youth without any family wealth or connections can do something better than anyone else in the world. Montville writes, the fog surrounding his childhood will make him forever accessible, universal. He will be the pattern saint of American possibility. Similarly, the fact that Ruth played in the pre-television era, when a relatively small portion of his fans had the opportunity to see him play, allowed his legend to grow through word of mouth and hyperbole of sports reporters. Reisler states that recent sluggers who surpassed Ruth's 60 home run mark, such as Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds, generated much less excitement than when Ruth repeatedly broke single-season home run records in the 1920s. Ruth dominated relatively small sports world, while Americans of the present era have made sports available to watch. His legacy Thomas Bartel describes Ruth as one of the first celebrity athletes. Numerous biographies have portrayed Ruth as larger than life. Creamer describes him as a unique figure in the social history of the United States. Ruth has even entered the language. A dominant figure in a field, whether within or without sports, is often referred to as the Babe Ruth of that field. Similarly, Ruthian has come to mean sports, colossal, dramatic, prodigious, magnificent, and with great power. In 2006, Montville stated that more books have been written about Ruth than any other member of Baseball Hall of Fame. At least 5 of these books, including Creamer's and Windheim's, were written in 1973 and 1974. The books were timed to capitalize on the increase in public interest in Ruth as Henry Aaron approached his career home run mark, which he broke on April 8, 1974. As he approached Ruth's record, Aaron stated, "I can't remember a day or year or I can't remember a day this year or last when I did not hear the name of Babe Ruth." Montville slugged that Ruth is probably even more popular today than he was when his career home run record was broken by Aaron. The long ball era that Ruth started continues in baseball to the delight of the fans. Owners build ballparks to encourage home runs, which are featured on SportsCenter and Baseball Tonight each evening during the season. The questions of performance-enhancing drugs, which dogged later home run hitters such as McGuire and Bonds, do nothing to diminish Ruth's reputation. His overindulgence with beer and hot dogs seemed part of a simpler time. In various surveys and rankings, Ruth has been named the greatest baseball player of all time. In 1998, the Sporting News ranked him number 1 on its list of baseball's 100 greatest players. In 1999, baseball fans named Ruth to the Major League Baseball's All-Century team. He was named baseball's greatest player ever in a ballot commemorating the 100th anniversary of professional baseball in 1969. The Associated Press reported in 1993 that Muhammad Ali was tied with Babe Ruth as the most recognized athlete in America. In 1999 ESP poll, he was ranked as the second greatest U.S. athlete of the century behind Michael Jordan. In 1983, the United States Postal Service honored Ruth with the issuance of a 20-cent stamp. Several of the most expensive items of sports memorabilia and baseball memorabilia ever sold at auction are associated with Ruth. As of November 2016, the most expensive piece of sports memorabilia ever sold is Ruth's 1920 Yankees jersey, which sold for $4,415,658 in 2012, an equivalent to $4.82 million in 2018. The bat, which he hit his first home run at Yankee Stadium, in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most expensive baseball bat sold at auction, having fetched $1,265,000 on December 2nd, 2004, equivalent to $1.678 million in 2018. A hat of Ruth's from the 1934 season set a record for a baseball cap when David Wells sold it at auction for $537,278 in 2012. Charlie Sheen sold Ruth's 1927 World Series ring for $2,093,927 at auction. It easily broke the record for a championship ring previously set when Julius Erving's 1974 ABA championship ring sold for $460,741 in 2011. One long-term survivor of the craze over Ruth may be the Babe Ruth Candy Bar. The original company to market the confectionery, the Curtis Candy Company, maintained that the bar was named after Ruth Cleveland, daughter of former President Grover Cleveland. She died in 1904, and the bar was first marketed in 1921, at the height of the craze over Ruth. He later sought to market candy bearing his name. He was refused a trademark because the Babe Ruth Bar. Corporate files from 1921 are no longer extant. The brand has changed hands several times and is now owned by Ferraro. The Ruth estate licensed his likeness for use in an advertising company for Baby Ruth in 1995. Due to a marketing arrangement in 2005, the Baby Ruth Bar became the official candy bar of Major League Baseball. In 2018, President Donald Trump announced that Ruth, along with Elvis Presley and Antonin Scalia, would posthumously receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Montville describes the continuing relevance of Babe Ruth in American culture. More than 3/4 of a century after he last swung a bat in a major league game, the fascination with his life and career continues. He is a bombastic, sloppy hero from our bombastic, sloppy history. Origins undetermined, a folk tale of American success. His moon face is as recognizable today as it was when he started out at Tom Zachary on a certain September afternoon in 1927. If sports has become the national religion, baseball is the patron saint. He stands at the heart of the game he played, the promise of a warm summer night, a bag of peanuts and a beer, and just maybe the longest ball hit out of a park. So there we go, folks. That is the biography. I did not have any idea in my mind that it would go for that long, but hopefully you guys have now been fully informed onto the biography of Babe Ruth. At least I still see some people are still with me here. I got 10 people in the stream. Look down and I see 10 people in the stream. Of course, I've been gone for 12:42. What a stream. See, we've been going for 2.5 hours now. I haven't even got into this. I'm not going to read through this, but I'll just show you the pages. This book back in the day was 25 cents, this little booklet. I've come across this, had it for a little while here. Just wanted to kind of share some of the back on this. You can see some of the pictures here. The back, it says Babe Ruth and William Bendix on location for the Babe Ruth story. This was the movie that they did make on Babe Ruth. So kind of hard. Let me see if I can readjust something here so I can get a better view so you can kind of see the pages here. Let me sorry. Okay, let's see. Why did it not let me? Oh, there it is. Okay. Let me move my camera up a little bit so I can hold this out in front so you can kind of see it a little bit more. So, Roy Del Ruth, producer and director of Allied Artists Production, The Babe Ruth Story. So again, this was back in the day when they did make a movie about his life. There's the person that starred in the role there, William Bendix as Babe Ruth for the story. And then Claire Trevor as Claire Hodgson. Okay. And they did just do show other ones here. Charles Bickford as Brother Matthias, from when he was in there. And then some of the other people that starred in the movie: Steve Levinson as Phil Conrad, William Frawley as Jack Dunn, Matt Briggs as Colonel Rupert, Gertrude Nielsen as the nightclub singer, and then just different things from the cast and some pictures from the movie. So if you've never seen it, you could probably, I'm assuming you could probably look it up on Netflix or maybe even YouTube or something and find the Babe Ruth story. And then it does show different pictures. Baseball hints famous by major league players. Babe Ruth in Hollywood. It does have here, it has his batting and pitching record. So this one's his pitching record up here. Then we have his World Series record. And then his all-time baseball record is here from 1914 through 1935. And some more pictures here, action on the field. All right, and then highlights from the film on this page here. And this page here is some behind the scenes. It looks like when he was in the barber shop, maybe getting the trimming up his nose hairs. Pretty funny kind of stuff here. And then, of course, Babe Ruth and William Bendix on location, the Babe Ruth story. So that's a little booklet that I do keep in my binder here with this, my little Babe Ruth collection here. I do have to add more cards in here when I go through my Hall of Fame section. But this is kind of like my tribute here. I'll kind of hold this up here so you can, let me unplug this real quick, so I can maneuver a little bit better here. And we can see these cards. I'll just kind of go through these. I'll show you what the backs do look like. It's a 162 card set. I do want to highlight this one for you. It's from 1992. Okay. Then you can see on the back the cards are numbered here. Card number 1, 2, 3. And again, this is the Babe Ruth collection. It was 1992 by a company called Mega Cards. It's similar to the style of the Conlon collection. If you're familiar with that, one of these days down the road, I'll highlight through the Conlon collection. I do have the whole Conlon series, if you're familiar with that. But I'll just show you the backs of these ones, and then I'll just show you the fronts on the rest of the cards here. This does tie into my whole video series, and hopefully I'll try and see if I can finish up by the 3-hour mark, maybe. Hopefully. These cards in this set do highlight his career. Okay, gotta do a little readjustment here. All right. So I'll just hold this like this and just kind of go through these cards in this set here. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to put something back on my computer here. Not that one. Let's see. Open this one. Sorry. Losing track of what I'm doing here. Might as well just center on this so we can get through this set of cards. I don't know. Kevin's card collecting might have left. That's fine. At least I see NASCAR still here. and maybe Lucky Lucky. Oh, I don't know why I showed the backs again. I was just going to show you the fronts of the cards. It would have been nice if that was a real autograph card, but it's just a facsimile of the autograph. So I'll just go through and highlight these cards so you can see this 1992 Babe Ruth card set. There we go. In 1935, place in history, lifetime, 714 home runs. And I'll finish this up and we'll get ready to finish up this stream here. I do appreciate everybody that was here. It looks like we have 10 people or 6 people left in the stream. At least when I did finish the video series, I had looked like 10. Make sure you don't forget to give me my thumbs up in the stream, guys. Do appreciate that. Appreciate you guys spending time with me on this Monday. This is my new schedule, in case you are wondering. If you go to my About Me tab, you will see where I did post the new schedule and how things will go. Again, my work schedule now is going to be Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. Of course, this Thursday I do not have to work. It is Thanksgiving, and Amazon is closed on Thanksgiving for delivery. So I'll be working Friday and Saturday, so I might do a stream on Thursday. It just depends on how the day goes with family. But we will see. How are my hours coming? I still need about 1,100 hours. It's a grueling process. Got my subscribers, but not my watch hours. It just takes a while. I know a lot of people tried to help as much as they can. I do have playlists listed on my channel. If you do watch a playlist, you do not have to comment to the videos on there. You can just let it play in background mode. I would ask you that if you do play it with no volume, YouTube will know that. Just put your volume setting. That's what I usually do when I am playing somebody's playlists. Just leave it at the lowest volume possible and you won't hear it. Pretty much audible yourself. You can barely if you put your ears right next to the speakers, but then that at least shows you are watching it and listening to the stream. They just do know for sure when you do mute the stream. But I do appreciate any help that I can get from people for my watch hours. That's why, as much as possible, I will try and do long live streams. We'll just see how that goes eventually down the road. I got December, January, February, March, almost into April. So I got about 5 months to try and reach that before I'll start losing some of my watch hours. Well, as long as I keep creating content, I'll eventually get there, hopefully. But yeah, once you hit your 1 year mark, where I started was the end of April, pretty much May I started my live streams. And that's where I did get most of my watch hours. So pretty much, I still got 5 months to get another 1,100 hours of watch time. But you know what? It's not going to change me and what I do and how I do it. At least my old videos should always remain up there unless YouTube does something pretty silly. Which it would not surprise me. They might do something like that. But you know what? At least I will have tried to preserve history. Go over the history of baseball and try and preserve it on the internet, if that's at all possible. And I will just keep doing this as long as I possibly can. It's fun. I enjoy doing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. And as long as I have at least some people watching it, I do appreciate that. There is a checklist there. That's the last 2 cards in the set. I'll show you the backs here real quick. Being remembered. All right. And then on the back here, got a little poem that was given there. It says, game called by darkness, let the curtain fall. No more remembered thunder sweeps the field. No more the ancient echoes hear the call. To one who wore so well both sword and shield, the big guys left us with the night to face. And there is no one who can take his place. Game called, and silence settles on the plain. Where is the crash of the ash against the sphere? Where is the mighty music, the refrain, that once brought joy to every waiting air? The big guys left us lonely in the park, forever waiting for the flaming spark. Game called, what more is there for one to say? How dull and drab the field looks to the eye, for one who ruled it in a golden day has waved his cap to bid us all goodbye. The big guy's gone, by land or sky or foam. May the great umpire call him safe at home. Grantland Rice, August 16th, 1948, the day Babe died. So there we go. That is our Babe Ruth biography. I do have another baseball hero book here. This has Ted Williams, Stan Musial, Red Schoendienst, and Hank Aaron are the pictured there. This is just another old magazine that I have, and I'm trying to remember. I think this it's just some cardboard. But there we go, folks. That's my little binder that I have my Babe Ruth collection in. I thought that appropriate to kind of show you guys that. Let me set this down for just a second while I move this book out of the way. Set it off to the side here. And we'll go ahead and get ready to wrap things up here, because I do have to run an errand. Get to the bank before they close this afternoon. Even though I know I got plenty of time for that. And I do have to give my wife a call. She called me while we were doing the stream. So let me get this situated back here real quick. All right. So hopefully, okay, his adopted daughter did pass away earlier this year. Okay. Thank you for that information there, Lucky. I do appreciate that. Let's see, NASCAR Donald, I'm wondering if you like the Seattle Mariners. I don't know where that come from. I'm pretty sure you know that by now, NASCAR. That's cool. Dearman, StreamYard. I might try StreamYard later on when I get back, buddy. Okay, remember what I said? I didn't realize I was going to go this long for my history lesson. But I do have to run to the bank real quick and run a few errands. Check the mail along with that. So, and I do have to go by my church. My daughter left something in church yesterday. I have to get that for her. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I don't think I'm going to make my 3-hour mark, but that's fine. I do got to wrap things up here and get ready. So tomorrow, let me see. I got to try and bring, come on, blah. Let's see. Oh, that's StreamYard. No, I don't want that. Sorry, I'm trying to check something out real quick here, and my computer is not cooperating with me. Gotta work on that later. Okay, there we go. So I just want to go over with you real quick my schedule, so you know what my new schedule is. Again, you can go to my About Me tab on my page. Just so you guys do know, you can go to my About Me tab on my page. All right. That's my About Me tab, my community list. Kind of shows I am live right now. Imagine that. So you go to my About Me tab. Oh, let me open this up all the way so it fills the screen. I don't know why I was doing that. And then, yeah, you can see my schedule on here. So starting yesterday, I was going to try and do a Sunday live stream, but we were busy doing some other things and we had family over. But Sunday could be tentative live stream days between 1 and 5 when I can fit it in. Mondays will be my baseball player / team biography history video series. Tomorrow will be our next installment in my Topps baseball card history video series. Wednesday will be my new day for Hall of Fame. Okay. Depending on how things go on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, that is my days I'll be working. I go to work 6:40 in the morning. Should get off about 4:40 in the afternoon. 4:40 to 5:10. Okay. I'll be having roughly 3 10-hour days. And if I do have time or energy to get a live stream in, I will try to do that. Okay. So we do have just a few people left. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to wrap things up here. Let me turn the camera around real quick before I end things here. Okay. So you can see that, yes, Donald Blomdahl is here. I am alive and well. The NASCAR, I think I told you the last time and stuff. Just do me a favor, go to my community tab and make sure you put that on there, okay? Go in the community tab, leave me a comment for that. Here, I'll flip it around and show you where I want you to go. The only reason I want you to do that, I can't remember all this stuff. So go to my community tab here. You will see and you can always leave new comments in here. I will go in and check there. Here it is right here. This one right here, it says, for my new history video series, please help me choose the player or team, biography, and history you would like me to share on my new video history series. I thought I fixed that. Hold on. Let me do that real quick. I forgot the Y on history here. I'm going to edit that right now. I thought I already fixed it once. There we go. Please post a comment in the comment section below. So right now, the only 2 people that put comments in here was Sally and Chad. Chad just wants me to do a different, like Fleer, Donruss, and Score, and that will be some of the baseball card histories I will do later. I'm going to finish up my Topps first, and then I'll move into another installment with another one. And then Sally, I already did, I think one of Sally's was the Cincinnati Red Stockings. So I am looking for new content. I do have some on a list that people, you can either do it that way or you can email me. I'd rather you put it on my community tab because that's what I'll check more often. So if NASCAR is still hanging out here, if you just go in here and leave a comment, put a comment in here, and put that what you want me there to put in there, okay? The Los Angeles Dodgers, and then Cody Bellinger and Justin Turner. Put those 2 players in there. Put the Dodgers up there. I can give you the history of the Dodgers. But I am more than willing to do any of those. So if you do have a chance, put them in my community tab, and I will be sure to get back with you. So what I am going to do is get ready to wrap things up here. I do have to get my errands done before it gets too late in the afternoon. It's already 1 o'clock. So this is Don Blomdahl, Hall of Fame veteran sports cards and collectibles, having come to you with another episode of my baseball player / baseball team biography or history video series. And until tomorrow, or maybe this afternoon, hope to join your streams this week, but work is crazy. busy this week with oh yeah, I'm sure Thanksgiving coming up this Thursday there, Lucky. I'm sure you're busy. All right, and then Christmas coming up after that. Black Friday starts Friday, and then from then until Christmas, it's going to be hectic. But if you can't, Lucky, I understand. No problem. One of these days, we'll get in touch with each other. We'll do that. So until then, I just want to go ahead and get ready to sign off here. It was my pleasure doing that longer history lesson, and I do appreciate each and everything that everybody does for me. I appreciate each one of you for being loyal subscribers to my channel, and I appreciate everything. So just hang around, Dearman. If you get my alerts, you'll know if I do go on StreamYard a little bit later. But let me go out and get my errands done, get some lunch, because it is 1 o'clock. And then I will see you guys maybe later. If not, tomorrow morning, 10:30 for sure. Bye now. You guys take care.